all systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy, GS Luke, here with our Round 3 Showdown stream for the Wyndham Championship. Gonna get you guys ready for tomorrow's action, which is going to be a little bit of a confusing slate with weather delaying us into Saturday. But here, we're gonna get through all of that confusion, give you guys a game plan of exactly what to do on Saturday, so you can have yourself a moving day. And a lot of people will be running around like chickens without their head, but as long as you have an idea ahead of time of exactly what to expect, I don't think it's that much of a problem. So that's exactly what we'll cover here. Welcome on in wherever you guys are. Hopefully you're having a fantastic Friday and getting ready for this weekend action of golf. We got Nick down there talking about guys shooting over par tomorrow morning. Yeah, that's it'd be great for your lineup. I know you're sweating out some showdown stuff, so best of luck to you. We got Antoine down there, also C. Floyd, J. Hooves as well, also A's Bob. Welcome on in, and let's have ourselves a slate. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Hit me up with any questions that you may have, and I will go through exactly how to attack this thing. So first things first, golf course played pretty flat so far, but play has not finished quite yet, and they're expected to get a bunch of rain overnight, which in my opinion is going to change the makeup of this course. They're expected to get about an inch of rain overall, which is going to make this thing soupy soft, and the fairway is going to be easier to hit. Green's going to be easier to hit as well, and players are going to be able to be more aggressive for rounds 3 and 4. And I don't even think it's just going to be felt for tomorrow's action, but also for Sunday as well. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Nick, for your lineup that you're sweating out. I think that they're going to be scoring despite some windier conditions, and they are going to be going off of threesomes off of both tees, so not really a weather edge that we're going to have for round 3. But tomorrow morning, it will be a little bit windier than what it was for this afternoon, closer to 10 miles an hour sustained, even potentially 20 mile an hour wind gusts. But with the softer conditions, I think the scoring is going to stay about the same, if not slightly improved from what you had the day before. And by the time we get to Saturday with the moving day pin locations, also the cut line getting some of the lower tier players out of there, I think the scoring average, even though the winds will be up compared to rounds 1 and 2, is going to improve for the third day, which when we talk props and betting on my live stream, which I think is going to be tomorrow morning on the prop side of things. So if you're betting on underdog and prize picks, make sure to check that out on my YouTube channel tomorrow morning. But it's important for that. I think the scoring's still going to be there, and we want nuke rounds for round 3. I don't think this is a grinded out slate like we'd sometimes have with this kind of wind forecast. If we were at a major championship level venue, it's going to be soft, it's short, it's only 7,000 yards. And when you give players a soft golf course in wedge in hand for, I think it's 12 of the 18 shots, it might even be, I think it's 12 of the 18 approaches players are typically using wedge on, it's definitely going to be scoreable, even if the winds are up out there. So worth noting from the tee time perspective, I already hinted at it, that it is going to be threesomes off of both sides. The cut line currently is in flux between -3 and -4. Data Golf has it as about a 70% chance of being -4. I personally think it's going to be closer to the -4 cut line at 100%. It's currently at T65 at -3. And this golf course that is going to be extra soft tomorrow morning is, I think, going to play perhaps easier, as I mentioned before. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people at T65 that could move that. We were in this situation a few weeks back. We all thought it was going to move to the number up, and it ended up staying stagnant at that number. So sometimes we get surprises, PGA Tour pressure, trying to make the weekend, especially in the last event of the year. A lot of these players are playing for the top 70, and even if they're not playing for the top 70, they're still trying to jockey for position for the top 150 and any sort of status in 2026. There's a lot of people that are going to be feeling it tomorrow morning. So even with those softer greens, your glimmer of hope, Nick, I guess would be for players for the mental aspect to choke over their last few holes. But I would expect that cut line to move from -3 to -4, which by the way, if it ends up being a -3 cut line, these players that are finished at -3, like Erasmus Højgaard, Aaron Baddeley, Nikolai Højgaard, et cetera, a lot of these players could be the absolute nuts for the next day because they're going to be sub 1% odds. No one's going to have them in lineups, or at least not very many are going to have them if that's the case, because beforehand, and this is what we're about to go through before we even go through shots gained metrics, building a player pool, et cetera, is what your game plan should be for tomorrow morning. And if you're not willing to wake up, it is going to be like I said, 10:30 start time is what they're aiming for. So I would imagine that DraftKings is going to have the start time at either 9:30 a.m., maybe even at 10:30 a.m., like the PGA Tour said. They usually update it. I think it's currently at 6 a.m., but I would expect that to move back as we get closer to it. You're going to be able to adjust tomorrow morning, but if you're not willing to wake up, let's say you're a West Coaster or you've got a late night scheduled tonight and you're just not able to get out there, then don't play heavy for round 3. That's the first thing that I'm going to say. And second off, only play people that you know are going to make the cut. So with it probably moving to -4, that means that you want to avoid some of these guys that are finished at -3. In fact, of the players that didn't finish their round, you really only want to be using players tomorrow, if you're not willing to wake up, that are probably at least -6, I would say, if they're still on the golf course. If they're -4 and they're finished, that's totally fine. So for example, like these players that I have on the screen right here, like a Bridgman, Hideki, McIntyre, some of your studs towards the top that are finished in, at least in my opinion, 100% -4 is going to be making it going forward. These kind of guys you can still use, but make sure you're not playing somebody that tomorrow morning is going to shoot +1, +2, maybe chokes down the stretch like I was mentioning, and then you have a 0, an absolute donut in one of your 6 plays. So I would say go lighter if that's the case. If you're not willing to wake up before lock, it's 10:30 a.m. Eastern time when they should have it. West Coast is going to be 7:30 a.m. So it could be cutting it close for some of you guys that are watching it. If that's the case, just play it safe. Take people that are going to be making it through for sure, but that is going to have an impact on ownership. And I still don't have mine completely completed at this point. I was going through and making some adjustments before we got on here, but the players that have finished and are through -4 or better, I have at significantly higher ownership than the guys that are even just on the golf course and a little bit sketchier at that -4, -5 range. I think a really good example of that would be like an Adam Scott, who's -4 and he's got 4 holes to go, or even Jordan Spieth at -4. There are players around them that are lower tier players, lower projections, but because they're at -4, -5, and they're finished as opposed to with the uncertainty of not getting through the cut line, like Kurt Kitayama, who's higher up the board, he's still on the golf course, but he's like -9, like for sure going to be making it to the weekend, is astronomically higher owned in my projections than players like a Jordan Spieth and Adam Scott. And the reason for that is not that I think that they're just better plays than those two. Maybe they are, right? Maybe that's your opinion. That's totally cool. But it's because of the fact that people know that they're going to be playing in round 3. And there's going to be plenty of casuals, plenty of people in that player pool that don't adjust their lineups. That impacts the ownership in quite a wonky way. So we're going to have people in my projections, by the way, that are going to end up missing the cut. So that's why having a site like SHIPIT Nation or my Patreon page where I post my personal projections, that's on my Patreon. That's why it's so important, because tomorrow there's going to be that movement and plenty of sites are just going to throw up their hands. They're not going to adjust them. They're not going to give you guys updated content as that happens. I'll be doing that on my Patreon. I know the SHIPIT Nation crew tries to do that as much as they can. At the very least, we'll push out a projection update on things like SaberSim, that kind of stuff whenever possible. You want to be at a site that takes Showdown seriously and that prioritizes their user base in that sort of way. So if you're not already a member at SHIPIT Nation or on my Patreon page, what are you guys waiting for? You've probably been watching this for a while, so I'd say 90% of you are already members. But if you're part of that 10% that hasn't quite signed up yet, this kind of slate, I think, really highlights the need for that kind of slate. Because the slapdick ones, the ones that maybe golf's their, like 4th, 5th biggest sport, they're doing like NFL, NBA, and that's really what they're focusing on. And they don't have a whole team of people doing golf stuff. They're not going to put in the time to go out there and adjust these projections. And that's not what you get at a site like mine or SHIPIT, of course, being extremely sweaty, try-hardy. That's what we pride ourselves around here. Tomorrow, if you want to play Showdown for round 3, you've got to have that kind of mindset. In my opinion, if you want to play it heavily, if you want to play it the right way, and let's talk about that, because this is, in my opinion, the far more interesting side of playing the slate, is if you wake up tomorrow, there's a real edge, especially with this many holes left. Oftentimes when we're in this situation, the delay happens later. Maybe they get back on the golf course and they only have to finish up like an hour of play. This is looking like it's a 2.5 hour, 3 hour window that they're going to have to finish in the morning. There's going to be a lot of movement in and outside of that cut line. So if you're somebody that's waking up, able to adjust, staying on top of that, as you know, a lot of your professional players, people playing heavy for tomorrow are going to be, then there's going to be low owned diamonds in the rough that you can get to. So for example, these players at -3 that are still on the golf course, they're also not going to get that much ownership. They've got a real chance, if they can birdie one of their last handful of holes, to get to -4 or better. And if they can do so, you're looking at, I would say at most, maybe like 3-4% ownership on this sort of play. I would expect that to steam up a little bit. At least that's where I had them now in their projection. Maybe they get to like 5-6% in any given contest, but they're going to be significantly lower owned than the guys around them. So, you know, the guys like Campos, Lauer, Schmid in the 6K range, you're looking at sub 1% ownership, I'd say, in some cases on those players. So it can be extremely valuable if you do so. And the further down the board we go, so like your Ben Coles, your Webb Simpsons that got to make up 2 shots, you can see I'm counting -4 is almost like the shoe-in cut line at this point, because it's really trending that much in that direction. But these kind of guys probably have to make up 2 shots to make it to round 3. The Fishburns, the Roys, the Nick Hardys, the Max Homas, if they end up making it to round 3, now your Homa might be closer to like, I don't know, 5 to 7%, because you will get some people that play the studs that end up squeezing their way through. But with value plays, that is not going to be the case. So like, you know, Siwoo Kim, maybe he'd be like that 5 to 7% ownership as well. Not unowned, but you know, if you told me Siwoo Kim is low single digits ownership, I'm playing him at that 100% of the time, pretty much regardless of price as well. But especially at a golf course like this that he's had so much success with, this is the kind of strategy and upside that I really think makes this slate one that if you're willing to wake up on, one of the bigger edges that we've had this entire year. Sometimes that's weather-based. Sometimes it's based on the laziness of the rest of the field. And if you're going to take advantage of this, I think the best place to do it is in large field GPPs. Large field GPPs will get a small subset of the field that are going to play guys that miss the cut. That's not really the main edge that I'm talking about, but you're going to have a higher percentage of people in, let's say, like the big $5 especially. That's the most slapdick of all the slapdick GPPs of, I would say, maybe the 50-cent GPP, if you're even able to get into those contests. I don't even think they do them for Showdown these days, unless it's a major championship. But the more slapdick the GPP that you're entering, the more people that are going to, like I said, either play guys that miss the cut or not get onto the guys that are squeaking their way into it. So, you know, single entry, some of your higher dollar stuff, I think you're going to see a lot more adjustment. And that's typically what you see in this scenario. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, think about it from a logistics standpoint. If you're waking up before lock, you're trying to scramble to, you know, maybe adjust your lineups, get in some of those low end diamonds in the rough, you're going to start with your highest entry lineups. And you're also going to start with your single entries, just because it's one lineup in that portfolio. It's not like you're, you know, managing a whole set of 150 or even 20 lineups at the same time. That's why those kind of contests, or maybe where that edge isn't as apparent. But large field GPPs, I think there is something to that. And taking advantage of the, you know, shitbox players, the ones that are sitting on the toilet in the middle of the night that say, oh, you know, I'm going to enter 5 lineups into this $5 GPP. They click random names if they're drunk enough. Sometimes they click players that aren't even playing. A lot of times, even if they're not, maybe they've sobered up enough at that point. They're entering their lineups in the middle of the night. The shitbox players, you can tell I don't have a very high opinion of those people. Maybe it's unfair, but a lot of the casual players, the, you know, degenerate waking up in the middle of the night, those sort of players, you are going to make some mistakes. You're people that aren't putting in all the research. They're just entering those kind of lineups. Take advantage where you can if you're going to be somebody that's waking up. So that's my take on the strategy component, more so from the game plan side. I think having a site like mine or the SHIPIT Nation website gives you infinitely better options, an infinitely easier way to break down the slate as it gets updated before lock. But if you're on a site that maybe doesn't have that, I think the best option is to join one of those kind of sites or both of them, or to wake up and you've really got to stay on top of it yourself. you've got to be paying attention to that leaderboard, know who the guys are that are going to be a little bit less steamed than the rest, and then exploit that in some of your lineups. So that's the strategy side, a little bit of a mouthful, a lot more than what we typically talk about on here, but it's important. It's a little bit of a different slate to attack as well. And by the way, you can see on here, they're starting at 7:30 Eastern time. That probably means that they're not going to finish play till around 10:30. Wouldn't surprise me if the start time is closer to 11. So keep that in mind. We're going to go through the shots gained metrics next. So we're not going to have these completely loaded in for the field. They are up to date with players as they finished when the delay happened. And half the field's done. So that's great. We're going to have those guys to go through fully. But even the players that are still on the golf course and have some holes to finish up tomorrow, most of them are like halfway done with their round. Some of them, like you can see with Cam Young, are through 15 holes. So we've got a really good idea of what he did in this round in particular. So we can still use these shots gained metrics. We're going to go through ball striking, short game, regression candidates as we always do. But you got to take it with a slight grain of salt, especially for those players that have 12 holes left. 11 holes is, I think, the worst player that they have out there. Like Sapiens through 7 or something like that. Not to pick on him, but he's in that last group and he's got the most golf left to play. Those players, maybe it means a little bit less than what it does with a Cam Young. But with the guys that finished all their holes, it's open season. So let's go to the ball striking stats and start there. That's always a good idea of, who hit the ball most consistently today, which is the most translatable for the next day of action. Jake Knapp was number 1. He's going to miss the cut, so not that relevant. But if it's a -3 cut line, or if Eric Cole can get one more birdie, he's hit the ball beautifully through his first 16 holes. So you can see 4 strokes ball striking. In fact, almost all of those coming with the iron play, which is an added bonus. That is the most important category between the off the tee and approach. That is what constitutes shots gained ball striking, by the way, which is this BS category that you see right there. OTT is off the tee and APP is approach, as you guys mostly know, but maybe you guys are newer, just to make sure that you're up to speed. Guys like a David Skin, shout out to him, right? We talked about him yesterday. Still not gaining short game, though. He lost in both categories once again, but the ball striking's been there through 36 holes, so maybe I'm going back to the well on Skinsy. He paid off with a pretty solid round today, though. Sami Valimaki, 3.8 shots gained to ball striking. Patrick Rogers, shout out to him, the LPOS, as my guy DGen75 called him, had a nuclear round. In fact, I know my guy Nick played him today, and we talked about James earlier, which I thought was touching, 100% true. If you play Patrick Rogers, he goes low, especially lucky number 7 like he did today. So only my guy DGen75, lucky number 7 and then 5 up top, that was giving us that. So he had Sanjay Im also having a nuclear round. He did it a lot with the ball striking stats. Michael Thorbjornsen, Gary Woodland, also guys like a Chesson Hadley, Nikolai Højgaard, all excelled in that specific category. So these are all players that I give a boost in my modeling to. And you could do the same thing as we typically do at this point, I'd say. Like even the guys that are only through half their holes, if their ball striking stats were solid, maybe you throw them in the pool for now. And then tomorrow morning, when we're seeing that play finishing up, if they're trending horribly for the holes in the morning, let's say they're shooting like +1, +2, even if they make the cut, maybe you yank them out of their lineups. But if they do anything reasonable tomorrow morning, it's probably not going to be anything shots gained wise that's getting you off of any of those sort of players. So like I said, sub-ideal, but still doable. Also, these guys that are in like the 2 to 2.5 shots gained range. So like that's your, Luke Clantons, Rico Hoey's, Ben Griffins of the world. Shout out to Ben Griffin. Eagle on the last hole. That was nuts. He was actually losing on approach before that. So it's take that one and just remember that the last hole, put the asterisk because that was probably 1.5 to 2 shots gained on that shot alone. But your Max Grazermans, he missed the cut, so RP to him doesn't really matter that he hit the ball well. That was for 2 days, by the way. Hit the ball well, could not get a putt to drop, so kind of weird for him, especially because he's a top 40 putter on the PGA Tour. Screwed me over in props too, so that's why I'm tilting that one a little bit more than some of these others. But these players, even the ones a little bit further down, like not gaining 3.5, 4 shots gained to the field, are still worthy of quite a bit of respect. And though it's a little bit of a different slate, the weather's throwing some people off, the players towards the top end of the ball striking list are typically going to get a little bit of extra steam. So, maybe not so much with your Skins, your Valimakis, but with your Sanjay Ims, for sure, even like a Michael Thorbjornsen or Nikolai Højgaard and Aaron Rai, are probably going to be slightly higher owned than they otherwise would have been because of how they hit the ball. So it is a great data point. It's something that you can use to try and find some diamonds in the rough, especially when you go a little bit further down to that 2 to 2.5 shots gained range. But these top tier guys, sometimes it steams them up a little bit more than we'd like. And then with the short game categories, it's a little bit of the exact opposite. Being too short game dependent, short game is around the green plus putting is a red flag. And it's not one that can completely eliminate a player from my pool. But if it's that kind of red flag plus high ownership, there's little to no chance that I'm using that kind of player. If it's that plus terrible shots gained to ball striking stats, then there's zero chance I'm using that guy in round number 3. So Cam Young was still solid ball striking wise, so we can't really say that with him. But there are some guys on here like a Thorbjorn Olesen, who at -5, he's going to make it through the cut, but he's losing almost 2 strokes on approach. It's kind of tough for me to want to play that kind of guy. The ownership's not crazy, so you could always say, or he could, I guess. That's the argument for playing a Thorbjorn Olesen. But stat-wise, don't love to see that he was so short game dependent. And you could say that about even some of these other players that like Hideki. He actually lost strokes ball striking, but gained about 3 strokes in the short game categories. At least if he hits the ball like he did for Friday, they're not going to find that same kind of success for Saturday's round. So these players that are deeply into the dark green, I sometimes downgrade in my process a bit. Doesn't mean that they're unplayable, especially if they're a low-owned flyer play. Like there are other reasons that I'm getting to plays, which we'll highlight here in just a minute or two. Those kind of plays, I'll kind of just like look past the shots gained metrics at times. But at least if I'm looking for, diamonds in the rough with the stats from today, these aren't players that I'm giving a huge boost to. And you can say the same thing with the around the green stats. The players that are heavily into the dark green here are also a bit of a red flag compared to some of their counterparts. And, when it's a Norlander who lost 2 strokes off the tee, a Carl Phillips who lost 1.5 strokes ball striking, but gained about 3.5, 3.6 in the short game categories, that's somebody that you're not going to see in my player pool. And that doesn't mean that he's immune from having a low round. It's just that for the flyer plays, the guys that are scrubs towards the bottom, they're going to be guys that I'd prefer over Carl Phillips. And I just have to try and find any semblance of form, any semblance of a reason to try and get to a play down low for me to mix them into lineups. I usually won't blindly do it unless there's like I said, the course history or high upside plays, which we'll talk about in a second here. But on the flip side, if we take a look at the players that lost a whole bunch of strokes in these short game categories, they can be looked to for a little bit of a bounce back. So for example, in Antoine Rosner, he missed the cut, but like him and Ryan Palmer, probably not losing 4 strokes putting every single day. Let's scroll down to try and find people that are more appropriate. So like, for example, in Adam Scott at T41, he's losing 2.5 strokes putting. Maybe tomorrow morning, you can wake up, try and find some fire on those greens, because ball striking wise, he's been solid for the first few days. So if you scroll down, Rico Hoey can say the same thing. He lost over 2 strokes putting. A Jacob Bridgman, by the way, extremely good putter, top 15, top 20 on the PGA Tour. He lost 2 strokes putting. It's hard to feel that that's going to happen every single day. These are bounce back candidates, particularly if their ball striking stats are there as well. And you can say that about the around the green category. It's not usually something you see multiple days in a row when you're losing 2 to 3 strokes in that category. So a Max Homa could be a little bit of a bounce back there. He's got to get on his horse, though. He's probably got to shoot -3 tomorrow morning to make the cut line. If he does, though, maybe a slightly lower owned play that you could consider getting to. A Brian Campbell could regress to the mean a little bit around the green, but he gained 3 strokes putting, so that kind of takes away from that. Around the green's not as extreme. It's usually the putting stats that I'm focusing on the most for short game regression, but that's how I use the shots gained metrics to my advantage. And there are a few other things that I use as well, especially if we're trying to find lower owned plays. The shots gained metrics are kind of nice for the medium to higher owned plays that you're considering. Reason for that is form typically leads to ownership, leads to steam in contest. And the mentality I was talking about before, where your casual players are going to play guys that made the cut, the ones that really aren't doing research, that are just bringing up DraftKings, looking at the current scores, are going to play all the guys at the top end of the board. So if you're trying to find players that are much lower owned, you're not really going to do that with the shots gained metrics as much, because those are guys that a lot of the rest of the field are going to be getting on anyways. And that's for your regular showdown slate, but especially when you have this kind of a weather delay situation. So I would say if you want to get different, you have to look past the shots gained metrics. I use course history a lot of times to do so. We've got quite a bit of course history around this track, so that's valuable in this kind of field. Also, high upside play. So people that make a lot of birdies or better, that is directly tied to your DraftKings score. I'll remind you guys, there's no placement points in play for round 3 showdown. The vast majority of your points for round 3 are going to be with this single category alone. So you could focus on that to find lower owned plays. Round 3 historical. That's something that they have on the SHIPIT Nation Stone. I think a great idea for round 3 and for tomorrow. You can go to Bermuda grass putting. That's the surface of the week. Variety of different reasons, rhymes and reasons for using a single player. Just have that in mind. Have a process for getting to all your plays. That's always what I'm going to be a proponent of on a live stream like this, is you can play whoever you want, but just know why you're playing them. And and I hate saying just like, oh, they're low owned, I'll play them, it's just the leverage play. Even if it's that's better than just picking names out of a hat. So have a process for finding a player pool. Now we're going to go through any sort of deep dives that you've got for me in the live chat. And then afterwards, we're going to wrap it up with some strategy on DraftKings. So let's catch up on chat, see what's going on down there, and get this thing going. Batia withdrew. And there's going to be a lot of those. The last time this happened, it was either 2 or 3 years ago. Don't remember the exact year, but they had a weather delay like this. A lot of players that were outside of the cut line and had like no chance to make it withdrew before they restarted play. So don't be surprised. I think they announced like 2 or 3 players that have already done so. As Batia EVR, then another player. It could be 5 to 10 by the time that we get to lock tomorrow morning. So that's another thing to consider on top of the movement, are guys that aren't even going to be playing tomorrow morning. He said they can't use lift clean in place for round 2. They cannot. So if they don't have it before the round starts, they can't institute it. They can do it for round 3. They're not going to do it for round 2, though. It's not something that they can change in the middle of the round, because it wouldn't be fair to the players that have already finished. So great question, Nick, and a little bit of a nuanced answer, but yeah, they cannot do that. You're going to set your alarm. Yeah, I already know you get up early, so you probably don't have to worry about that as much. I appreciate that, Bob. Thank you for that. You said people that are -2 can make it super low owned. Yeah, even the -1s. I didn't delete them on my sheet, at least. I deleted the guys that were even to over par. So if they were on the golf course, they were like 5 shots off the cut line. I'm not going to project them for the next day. But yeah, the evens, maybe if they have enough holes left. I think I had like one of those guys still on my projection sheet. But yeah, the -2s have got a shot. And if they make it, sub 1.5 to 2% ownership, which is going to be fantastic. He said, did I just call Homa a stud? Yeah, I guess in this field he's a stud, but yeah, not so much anymore, huh? Last year hasn't been the best for him. You're winning the $5 right now. Does that make you the head of the slapdicks? Yeah, and I always play in that contest. I like to try and attack some of the other, casual players that are in there. But you've got to think, if you're sitting on the toilet in the middle of the night, you've got a $25 to $50 budget. You love yourself that $5 GPP. It's part of the reason I max enter it so much. It's more so in my stakes, right? I'm not max entering the big $25 on every single slate, at least not quite yet. The $5 low is right in my sweet spot. He said, Rye's going to win this thing. He said, Cam Young's going to choke. I would say history definitely supports your argument. Aaron Rye won last year. Cam Young, I've played him multiple times for outrights, but he's been in contention. It's a tough scene. So we'll see. Maybe he shakes the narrative. You never know, right? That's why we say, or he could so much around here. What's going on, Ross? You said should be interesting for Showdown. Yeah, I think one that you have to stay on top of. Having ourselves a day, so can't complain. You make your single entry lineups on the shit box. I do that at times too for my single entries, at least if I'm hand building. But most people that are doing that, players are going to beat long-term, that's for sure. He said, do I just preset my lineups and then adjust as the time gets closer? That's going to be what I'm doing. I think it depends on your plans tomorrow morning. I mean, if you're not waking up, then yeah, you're going to have to preset your lineups, and you're going to have to X out the players that have any chance of not playing in round 3. So it's kind of dependent on your schedule, I guess, even your time zone on what you're going to do there. But it's, we touched on that a little bit earlier. So you might want to check that out. I think it's about 5 to 10 minutes in. I give about a whole 10-minute spiel on that aspect. He said, Decky's +5 on 11. Yeah, triple bogey today, double in round 1. That was pretty crazy. And yeah, you said Celinda withdrew as well. Yeah, I noticed that. I guess he was the third one. Don't be surprised, as I was saying, guys, if it's like 10 to 15 that end up making that list. What I'll say about these contests on DraftKings, though, are that they're bigger than they probably should be, which can be a very big advantage for us because there's going to be overlay in some of these contests. I don't think every single one. I think it depends. Like some of the single entries, especially, I think there's going to be a chance for some overlay. But this sand trap has 6,000 entries. So if, let's say that it's only at like 3,500 to 4,000 in the morning. If you've got the bankroll for, and hell, I might even deposit some extra money to play this $25 GPP. Something I'd consider doing for tomorrow. So be on overlay watch. The payout structures of those are still super top heavy. Like that sand trap is I don't know. It's not horrendous. It's not like a third to first, but still not close to that 10% to first that we're looking for. This one is an eighth to first place. So this is the $5 GPP, which, like I said, is the king of the slapdick contest. What's great about it is that you have that potential edge to attack, but also it's only an eighth to first. So it's less top heavy than the $25. This is going to be where most of my exposure is going to be. And it's also bigger. So I think it has a better chance for overlay. There are more entries in here already close to 2,000, but that's going to be something that I'm eyeing up as well. You've got your single entries. Maybe some of the bigger ones don't get filled. You've also got this 4-entry $250. That's something that we could look at as well. That one overlays a lot of times when other contests aren't overlaying. But you've also got the $12 single entry, the $33 single entry that have ideal payout structures. It's I don't know, it's a normal showdown slate. Like they didn't size down the contest even with the weather situation that was projected. So good on DraftKings for still giving us quality contests and could give us that potential overlay on top of it. Then the last thing we'll go through is actually building a lineup, which is mostly just coming down to ownership, which is a carbon copy of round number 2. We don't have placement points to worry about. We don't have to worry about where players are starting, other than to make sure that they're actually playing for round 3. So we're going to try and get as much leverage into this lineup as possible. And we're going to build a lineup now, but it's not really going to be the true process because tomorrow morning, the players moving in and outside of the cut line are going to have a drastic impact on how we play this thing. But let's just build this, and we can kind of talk about some of the things you might be considering as you go through this. And I guess we'll even look at it through different lenses, like depending on whether you're waking up or not, because that's going to have an impact on how we're building right here. Okay, so when you're towards the top end of the board, I've got like a Ben Griffin, you've got McIntyre, Hideki Matsuyama that are done through the cut line. If you're not waking up tomorrow morning, those are going to be your primary options. And you can add Fitz on top of that. He's also done at -4. But your Jordan Spieths of the world, let's see who else is on the line. I guess it's mostly just Spieth. Like Rai can probably still play even if you're not waking up. He's -13. I think he's good there. But your Adam Scotts, I know Denny finished, so you don't have to worry about him. You could play Denny because he's already in the clubhouse at -4. But like your Adam Scotts, your Jordan Spieths, those would be like, I guess even Harry Hall at -5. He's still on the golf course as well. You got to double think playing those kind of guys if you're not going to be up to adjust for it. So let's assume that you're adjusting, right? That we're going to do that. That's the more interesting kind of lineup construction that we're going to go through here. If not, it would be taking Ben Griffin, taking McIntyre chalk, Hideki chalk. These players, though, that are in limbo are not going to be esteemed. So if we decide to go with some of those players instead, there's going to be a little bit of a game theory edge to mix in. So let's throw in Jordan Spieth. We're still going to use Ben Griffin, though. So we're still going to use one of those guys that's finished. I think that's still fine. Let's also throw in an Adam Scott at -4. This is going to be us assuming that we're waking up, making sure that these two shoot even, par, or better and are able to make it to the weekend. But now we've got a Jordan Spieth, who he'll still probably be at least 12-15% owned. But compared to some of the other guys around him at 20 to 25%, it's going to be a discount. Same thing on Adam Scott. I'll probably be closer to like maybe 11-12% ownership, give or percent, maybe 2% in either direction, but lower owned than like Kurt Kitayama, for example. Who Kitayama, I've got it over 20% in my first set of projections. So you're getting that ownership discount, and in my opinion, better plays than a lot of those other chalkier guys around him. So we've got those guys mixed in. Let's also throw in a JT Poston. He's already finished, but I love the course fit. He was one of my bets this week, so I'll just throw him in there at T22s. His form's also pretty decent as well. It's not like he's a ball striking popper, but he's a course history guy. I mentioned there are other reasons at the top of the shots gain metrics where I'll get to players. Course history, high upside. JT Poston would be a prime example of that.
Let's throw in another leverage play, which it doesn't have to be somebody that's still on the course, but it could be somebody that's a little bit further down the leaderboard that's already done. So, for example, Luke Clanton's already finished at -4. He's not going to get nearly as much steam as some of the other chalkier guys around him. And then Bridgman, I believe Bridgman's still on the course. Let me double check on that one. Let's see. So no, he's finished at -4. So no concerns on that one. You could use like a Bridgman as your last man in at $6,900 and feel pretty good about it because we don't have a whole bunch of chalk in this lineup. In fact, I guess Griffin's getting some ownership. You could say that there. Maybe a Poston too. He's like 10, and maybe even like 12, 13% ownership because he's finished in at that -6 number. But outside of those two, you've got average to below average ownership on a Spieth, a Scott, Luke Clanton as well, average to below average ownership. And then Bridgman is your last minute at T41, which could be the cut line. He's not going to be more than, I don't know, 5, 6, maybe 7% ownership in a few different contests where he gets steamed a little bit more so than the rest of the contest out there. You'd be okay in the large field GPPs and especially in a single entry contest. In fact, if you were in a single entry, if you were in a contest that's maybe not as large as the big $5 or $25, then you can afford to take a little bit more chalk towards the top. So for example, like if you don't want to take the risk on a Jordan Spieth, in single entries, something like the big $100, probably play the ownership game a little bit less. So you could choose to do that. Maybe you still play Jordan Spieth, but you go, you know what? I'm not going to take the chance on an Adam Scott. Maybe you think he's a little bit sketchier in that morning. Yeah, you go to a slightly higher owned McCarthy, who you may go higher owned McCarthy. How is he going to be that much higher owned than Adam Scott? That's that psychological edge coming in where people are going to play people that are for sure through the cut line, where they don't have to wake up and sweat it out. Them moving in or outside of that number. Denny's done and good at -4. I think that's at least worth 3 to 4%. And even before I was making those adjustments, I had both of them at about the same ownership number. Denny, by the way, has fantastic course history. So I think people are going to get there on him. Same thing with Scott. He's a good player. His form's been sketchier too. So I had actually preferred Denny between those two players, but Denny's going to be the higher owned of those two as well. So you've got to consider that. But even if you're in a single entry and you're in that kind of lower, smaller field contest, you don't have to think about the ownership as much. So if you want to play a Denny who's getting that maybe extra 5%, there are better contests to go out there and accomplish that. So in my opinion, your lineup construction, your plans for tomorrow morning are all going to impact how you're building lineups, which makes this a little bit more of a head case, a little bit more involved than what we typically have, which can be annoying to some, maybe even slightly overwhelming, right? That's why we did this live stream, to try and simplify it and give you guys that game plan. But it's also one where you can, take advantage of that, because there are going to be people that don't have a game plan, maybe don't have an idea how to attack this kind of slate, that are almost donating money for round number 3. So implement all of that to your best of ability. Wake up if you can and adjust your lineups, and let's have ourselves a Saturday. So best of luck out there with everything that you guys are entering. I hope to see your names towards the top end of the GPPs. Join my Patreon page for all of my projections and player poll for round 3. As I said, I'll be adjusting those tomorrow morning. And also make sure to join the SHIPIT Nation website. They're going to have their projections, their stone for all of their members up there as well, for the sweaty tryhards and the people that are willing to put in the work on a slate like this. And, if you're the lazy type, right, it's okay. We still welcome you here as well. But this channel, process-based, really not about the picks, more so trying to give you guys an idea of how to become a better PGA DFS player. Those are the players that we love around here. So, for any of those sweaty tryhards out here, best of luck. I hope you guys have all the success out there for round 3. Like I said, hopefully see you at the top of the boards. Round 3 prop stream, going to be doing that tomorrow morning. I've kind of decided that at this point, especially with them not having the matchup boards yet, and probably not a whole lot on like Prize Picks and Underdog. Going to be doing that tomorrow morning as play is finishing up. So if you're looking for the pick'em sites, sports books, matchups, that kind of stuff, make sure to check that out. Then that'll be at the LukeDFS YouTube channel. That's where I do all the prop and betting stuff. DFS and fantasy, always here on the SHIPIT Nation channel side. But that's all I've got, guys. Appreciate you. I'll go over any last second questions that you've got in the chat. If you haven't already smashed that like button, go ahead and do so. And let's get it for moving day. He said, what's going on? He said, good to see me, bro. And he loved the strategy talk, of course. He said, deep dive on Michael Kim. So yeah, let's go through it. Not somebody that I've gone through at this point myself. So very curious to see how he played today. So about neutral in all 4 categories, he did gain about a half a stroke ball striking, which isn't significant, but it is a nice touch. It's better than him losing half a stroke to the field. And then he gained a stroke putting. This stat profile is a 5.5 out of 10. It really doesn't tell us that much. So that's why I have him so close to a 5. But I'll give him the extra 0.5 because he was slightly positive with the ball striking stats. But yeah, at least stat-wise, man, I don't have that much to say about him. At T22, he could get maybe average to slightly above average ownership compared to some of the other players around him. But ownership really wouldn't be that big of a concern to me if you were considering using a Michael Kim. Let's look at round 1. So round 2 didn't tell us that much. I will look at the Thursday stats for you. So round 1 was a little bit more putting dependent. I do remember that now because we brought him up for the round 1 showdown or round 2 showdown stream. Yeah, it's like I said, 5.5 out of 10. I don't really have that much to say about him in either direction. Still usable though, especially from the or he could standpoint. And you want to look at Denny McCarthy. Let's do that one as well. So Denny today could not buy a putt for his life, at least from what I could tell. He did gain strokes on the greens. He made a 40-footer. I'm assuming that had a lot to do with that. But outside of that 40-footer that he made, which by the way was for par, it wasn't even for a birdie or an eagle or anything like that. He was about a neutral to the field, and then he gained 0.7 strokes ball striking. So he's a 6 out of 10, maybe a slightly better stat profile just because he was closer to a stroke gained with the approach play. And I just realized we're looking at round 1, so we got to scratch that. Good round 1 stat profile, but let's take a look at today. That's really what we wanted to deep dive. He had 1.6 strokes approach, so even better in that category. So what we said does apply, but we wanted to get the right stats. And then like I thought he did, this is more so what I was expecting to see here. He lost 1.3, almost 1.4 strokes on the green. So, and that is even with him making that 40-footer for par. So realistically, for the other 17 holes, he probably lost 2.5 strokes putting. Denny McCarthy, we know him as one of the best putters on tour. This year has actually not been as good as what he historically has been on the greens, but even then is still, let's see, gaining 0.12 shots gained putting per round. I would expect that to come back rather drastically tomorrow. And if he can do that, hit the ball like he did for round 2, could be a big day for Denny McCarthy, or Denny McBuckets as I call him. So good shout on that. And I'm glad I caught the round on that because yeah, the putting did not seem as good as what it showed there at first. He said, stay woke. He said, Hoey is one of the most consistent putters on tour. Yeah, I don't know about that one. Rico Hoey's a great ball striker. I know you're saying that tongue in cheek as a little bit of a joke. But yeah, not a very consistent putter. What did he go? Losing 2 strokes today. Day before that, also lost strokes putting. Yeah, what consistently shit, right? That's, I think, what you're getting at there. Yeah, look at this. Deep into the dark green, almost dark red almost every single week. And then did gain at the RBC Canadian, though. And coincidentally, he didn't even have as good ball striking that week. So tough scene for him, that's for sure. He said DraftKings might not allow time for changes. They move it back, Steven. So from my experience, 99% of the time, they do give you that, especially when the tour gives us a heads up. If they hadn't given us the potential start time at 10:30, I would tend to agree with you. But at the very least, they're going to move it to 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And if not closer to the 10:30, or even, I think with them having 11 holes to play, they might even have to move it to like 11 or 11:30 start time. They'll move it back as far as they possibly can. So good concern, but one that they've been good about over the last few years. They haven't really done that to us. And you say consistently losing 2 strokes. Yeah, that's his thing, man. It's he's really got to figure that out. Imagine if he was even a neutral in a lot of those events. He was making cuts. He was gaining like 6-7 strokes ball striking at times. He's a top 25 player on tour this year, most likely. So at some point, I'll figure it out, and maybe he pulls with Scotty Scheffler. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are getting to for tomorrow. I hope to see a lot of you guys at the top end of the board. And round 4, by the way, do want to put this PSA out there. Live stream is going to be at 11 p.m. So it's going to be extremely late compared to when we're normally going live. My best buddy has got a wedding tomorrow, so I'm going to be there, part of that. I'm staying for most, if not all of that. I'll be getting home close to about 10, maybe even 10:30. So when I get home, I'll take a quick look at some of the shots gained metrics and then hop on live stream at 11 p.m. Eastern time. So the West Coasters are probably like, what's the big deal about that, right? It's just 8 p.m. for you guys. Yeah, I know a little bit late for some people, but do have to account for that, right? You only get married once, one of my good lads. So I definitely have to be there for him, but still we'll be doing the live stream just a little bit later than what we're used to. So make sure you stop on by for that and for the prop and betting live stream that I'll be doing tomorrow morning, guys.